As Guyana sits on the economic and political crossroads, we speak to the nation's opinion leaders and decision makers to get their views on the challenges the country faces and the path it must take to achieve national development. Welcome to Nation Watch. Now here is your host Mervyn Williams, former member of the Guyana Parliament.
Hello and welcome to today's edition of Nation Watch. Today is Sunday, 1st October 2023. The year is almost out and we're running closer and closer to regional and general elections in Guyana. I have the honor of having Mr. Aubrey Norton, leader of the People's National Congress Reform and leader of the parliamentary opposition in studio today, and we are going to be discussing current political issues. Mr. Norton, welcome once again.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having me, and a good afternoon to your viewing and listening audience as well.
Straight to the meat of the matter, sir. The parliamentary opposition which you lead is on an aggressive drive internationally, engaging the Guyanese diaspora, engaging international leadership. You recently had a meeting, your team, and had a meeting on Capitol Hill with a congressional team. How impactful was that engagement, and how does the outcome of that engagement benefit Guyana?
Well, from the inception, when I became opposition, first of all, leading the PNC, we began to engage the international community, ensure that they have a true image of what is happening in Guyana. It's not being done only by us in the PNC, but all those who are affected by the nature of the PPP. And so you will see others involved. But we have been engaging and we have been meeting a number of people over the last 2 years, and I believe it is bearing fruit. The most recent event is the conference, the diaspora conference that was spearheaded by CGID, which is led by Rickford Burke. And we participated in that conference, though the PPP were trying to make it as if this was an opposition conference. It was not. As I understand it, the opposition and many others were invited to participate, and we participated. Also, Guyanese in the diaspora who felt they need to bring to the attention of the American government the actual situation in Guyana, they also participated and took their positions to Capitol Hill. At Capitol Hill, we had very fruitful engagement with the Black Caucus and Minority Leader Jeffries. We were able to provide them with information in a dossier. Unlike what some are saying, the dossier does have information about the discrimination in Guyana. You know, Nigel Hughes did a comprehensive report that was there. I also even believe that the old one which Freddie Kissoon did years ago was there. So we have provided them with a lot of information. We will continue to do more detailed work so that we can provide them with the more information so that they, in taking their decisions, can be influenced by the reality in Guyana rather than by PPP propaganda, which seems to be the order of the day.
Well, it is evident that target PPP has been hit. I saw a clip of the General Secretary of the PPP saying that, I have been following every international move that Aubrey Norton has been making. I have listened to every word that he had said at every one of the fora that he attended. It is quite interesting that such an open admission has been made. Are you satisfied that the work that is being done on the international scene by the parliamentary opposition and other concerned Guyanese interest groups is in fact creating or having the kind of impact that you anticipated it would, or do you have much more to do to achieve that?
I think it is making the impact, though we have to continue to do work to ensure that we are more impacted. As leader of the opposition, we welcome the assistance of all Guyanese to help us put this case before the international community. You're aware that the international community was misled, and that is how they installed the PPP in government. And so we know that we had to undo that narrative, which I think we have successfully done. I'm not worried about Jack Dale. He doesn't respond with substance. He's just what I call a rabble rouser. But to sit down and be involved in serious intellectual debate and dealing with the issues of the country, he's found wanting. In fact, it is for that reason I think he ends up behaving like a yard fowl. But that is his choice. I think we have been able to point out a few critical things. One, that even with oil resources, the people of Guyana are not benefiting. And they put it as if we spoke only to the African Guyanese issue. That is not true. In my presentation, we made it very clear that yes, there is the problem of discrimination against the African Guyanese, but we also pointed out that there's discrimination against indigenous peoples as well as Indo-Guyanese who do not share the same view with the People's Progressive Party. And so we saw ourselves as promoting the case for Guyana. We put it out there that with all the resources from oil, the people of Guyana are not benefiting. In my meeting with the IMF, I pointed out to them that here is it, you having income from oil. Here is it, you're celebrating the fastest growing economy in the world, but you are not increasing wages and salaries, not even close to what they should be, which means that you have a deliberate policy to ensure that the Guyanese workers do not benefit from oil and gas, while all that you're doing, they are structured to ensure your friends, your family, your PPP elite benefit. So we have been able to point them in that direction. We've been able to point to them in the direction of understanding that mere infrastructure projects by themselves cannot solve the problem. In fact, we were very clear that a lot of the infrastructure projects were aimed at corruption. But when it comes to structured projects to open new areas, to help us in this era of climate change, to shift to highland, all those critical issues are not being addressed. At the same time, you have a high cost of living. We pointed out to the IMF that you said that you mentioned the inflation rate, but has that reduction in inflation rate impacted the Guyanese in a positive way? No, it hasn't. What in fact has happened is that the wages continue to be low, the prices continue to increase, and so your inflation doesn't necessarily reflect what is happening in terms of the cost of living. And we have said to them that these issues have got to be investigated because, data is a funny thing. Depending on how you use it, it could achieve whatever objective you want. Yeah. But for us, what matters is the Guyanese people benefiting. And so we made it very clear in the conference that the Guyanese people, the large majority of the Guyanese people weren't benefiting, and that we are not using the resources of the country to fight the possibility of Dutch disease, in which the oil sector takes over, and then the other sectors are very small. And then once you run into problems with oil, the general economy is in shambles. While the government pays lip service to diversifying, you're not seeing the resources being put into diversification. I made it clear in my budget presentation that an APNU AFC government will shift agriculture while it exists on the coast to regions 1, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Because if you can get your agricultural production up in those areas, you'll be creating jobs for people in those areas, as well as you will contribute to the bringing down of the price of goods and services in that area. And so we opt for a more holistic approach. The government seems bent on large monies in infrastructure. I sent you heard that madman critic cussing up and going on over e-contracts. Now, that isn't going to help Guyana. It might help a few individuals. So the major problem is there is the absence of a holistic developmental strategy and program to develop the people of Guyana. And in our presentation, we made it very clear to them that we have a people-centered development strategy, and the whole purpose of that strategy is to improve the quality of life of the people.
I want to go back to the Capitol Hill engagement to put it in a certain context and get your comment. Your team's engagement with the congressional team followed an Irfan Ali-led engagement, PPP engagement with the same team. Comment for us, please, on the composition of the Ali team and what you sense were the major differences in terms of presentations of the two sides. Do a comparison, brief comparison for us.
Before we compare, we have to get the background. Now, Irfan Ali heard that there was going to be this CGID conference. And so he requested a meeting with the man that they had cursed up. Now, they were given an audience. And after that, we were given an audience. I think what Irfan they spent their time doing is trying to suggest that there was no discrimination. But the very team they comprise or put together suggested that they were in some regard admitting to the racism. I would have thought that you would have had a powerful African Guyanese team. In our case, we had all ethnic groups represented, and all of them could have stood on their own. The significant difference with us too is that as a group, but I don't know how they prepared. We prepared it as a group. We had presentations from everyone. So when we were speaking on behalf of the opposition, because for days we spent time discussing the issues and ensuring that we were on one page. So when we got out there, the other thing I think that is significantly different, the PPP has to try and defend its poor record. We had to just put the situation of Guyana there, and then we identify our vision and plans for Guyana. I don't think they would be in a position to do that because they are visionless. I've regularly said that they don't plan. I believe what they do is like the little boy, they flick and hope they land on the foot. But many times they land on their head. So I think there's really little or no comparison between the two teams. I don't know if they carry the cuss down nature to there. But I see they didn't walk with Jack Leo, so they might have suggested that they didn't. But we were more concerned with putting the facts, describing the reality in Guyana. We even point out to them that there's a creeping one-party state in Guyana, and we were able to provide evidence of it. We showed them what they did with the Public Accounts Committee, where for years the Public Accounts Committee, 3 members formed a quorum, and if the opposition alone was there, they can have the meeting and scrutinize it. They changed that. We pointed that out to them. So we showed them the nature that the procurement commission. Years ago, the decision was made that we should have a procurement commission. It took the APNU, AFC, when it came to power in 2015, to put it in place. And now again, we are seeing the emasculation of the Public Procurement Commission because the government wants to give contracts to its cronies. We show them that all the guardrails of democracy are being removed. We pointed out to them, look, if you're interested in free and fair elections, what can be your objection to a clean voters list and biometrics? All of those things we have pointed out. We've even showed them the mathematical impossibility of what constitutes this voters list. So I think we were able to outline our position. We outlined clearly our developmental strategy for Guyana. And I think we have been significantly different to the People's Progressive Party. I don't know that Irfan Ali can articulate a development strategy.
There's a deliberate propaganda drive by the People's Progressive Party to say to the supporters of the opposition, which the official number says in the region of 49%, but which we believe to be in excess of 50%, that look, Norton and the PNC and this coalition group of people, they're not driving their own agenda. Somebody else is pushing them to the extent that there's this conference that they had up in the United States in Washington, D.C., that Norton couldn't even pick his own team. Clarify for the benefit of our viewers and supporters. Again, you did point out that the conference was organized by CGID and that you were invited as a team to participate.
And CGID had the right to invite who they wanted to invite, which they did. When it came to the team that I would have led, I made it very clear that we had to determine the team. And there were persons there who weren't invited by CGID that ended up going to the conference. So I wouldn't worry with that kind of talk. Look, you're dealing with a political party. First, they started by saying I was dunce. I sensed they can't convince the Guyanese people about that. Then I didn't know anything about politics and we call it, according to Jack Dale, he never even served at high levels in the government. And they went down that road. Recently, I saw him saying, well, at least he knows foreign policy. And now I'm hearing this thing that somebody is driving my agenda. Well, I think he's talking about Irfan Ali. Any question I'm asked, whether home or abroad, I have always been in a position to answer it from a position of knowledge. I do not know who's going to drive our agenda. Our agenda is driven by the people of Guyana. The people of Guyana need an improvement in their quality of life. And everything that we have articulated so far points in the direction of us moving in a people-centered direction and doing the things to ensure that our people benefit. That is our major concern. And if that is what is driven by external forces, I welcome it. But I can say to you, we carved it. The concept of people-centered development existed before. But we have carved the people-centered development strategy for Guyana, which we will continue to unleash. I remember when we talk about a rent-to-own, they dismissed it in Parliament. I now hear they are considering inside there to put it in the next budget. Well, we would welcome it. It's in the interest of the people. Of course, we will state it is not original to them.
And PNC has done it before.
And we have done it before. Yeah. So sometimes you have to recognize you have opponents. And your opponents will just talk. When you have an opponent like Jack Dale, who is overrated, who is a failed leader, virtually every project he touched failed. When you have that kind of person, you expect the low levels that you get from them. It is our task now to ensure that we engage people, we talk with them, we get over our message, we explain to them that they are corrupt, that they will seek to bribe them in the local government election. Here was Jack. They were saying, oh, we'll win Linden, New Amsterdam, Georgetown, and he was going on. When he lost, he started to talk about making inroads. But the kind of money he paid, he really made no inroads. So let us not get over-focused on Barra Jack Dale. When you want a man that is self-destructive, it's Barra Jack Dale. And so let him continue to focus on us. We'll continue to focus on policies or programs. We are going to be there on the ground. I remember when I started walking about Guyana, when I became leader. Oh, they were very critical. And then suddenly they walking about. It was not, Norton was out of place for being in a rum shop with ordinary people or at a corner with ordinary people. Now they're imitating, they're doing the same thing. So for me, we are succeeding. Let them stew in their own fat.
In fact, the man who holds the highest office in the land looked from time to time as though he was going to inflict personal injury upon himself trying to dance.
Oh, yes.
But that is beside the point. Now, regarding, you mentioned foreign policy. foreign relations. You recently had an engagement with Mr. Ali regarding the border controversy. I do not get the sense that the People's Progressive Party, the government of Guyana, has been as open about this engagement as you have. You've issued a statement, you had interaction on this matter publicly, but we've not heard anything from the government. What's happening there?
No, I can only tell you about the engagement first. Yes, I did receive a call from the president and I responded. I believe it is our duty as Guyanese to be united on the Guyana-Venezuela territorial controversy. I have no qualms. I saw people writing that I didn't exact anything from it and all kinds of nonsense. First and foremost, if you don't have the land, there can be anything that you could exact. Your first obligation is to recognize that the arbitral award of 1899 settled this issue. And that having settled the issue, the land is Guyana's land. And we as Guyanese, regardless of our political persuasion, we have to be united on this question of the Guyana-Venezuela territorial controversy. Of course, I'm taken back by the ineptitude of the government. For instance, were we carving this foreign policy position, I would not have made so much about the referendum and drawing attention because we have this matter before the ICG. I would have done my diplomatic work to ensure we get the support of countries, the support of CARICOM, the support of the Commonwealth. But I would not have given the level of credence to this referendum. I would have focused our people on saying, look, we have this matter, we have a case, we will win this case, let us continue to focus. When you shift off to the referendum, and he did mention to me about the referendum, but I chose in my own deliberate judgment not to go down the road of talking about referendum. Because I think it's an attempt to shift focus away from the International Court of Justice. Mm-hmm. And I think if they were, well, they don't have a foreign minister. They have a man in the foreign ministry. I've sat in parliament for heading to 2 years. He has never made one proper foreign policy pronouncement, even in the budget debate. So it is obvious that he is out of his depths. But if you had a proper foreign minister, you would have had a structured approach and he would have said to the government, let us focus on the ICG. Let us minimize Venezuela's attempts to shift focus from their own local situation to us. That's one of the first things I would have done. Second, the next thing I would have done is to ensure that there is a continuous education program, educating our children and all the people of Guyana on this fact that this land belongs to us. What the government does is Venezuela makes some noise and they come and make noise. But when it comes to a structured approach to ensure the Guyanese people are conscious of it, that we keep it in the focus of the Guyanese people, probably only if you go in a party, you hear not one blade of grass. Do you get any focus on this issue? While Venezuela continuously focus on it. And then policy-wise, we have obligations as a member of the International Migration Organization and to the conventions we subscribe to treat migrants in a particular way. And we should honor that. But we should also be politically sensible to know that we cannot put in the territory that they're claiming large numbers of Venezuelans and believe that can be safe. If we do not develop a clear policy framework which says, yes, we'll have migration because of the situation in Venezuela. Two, that we have some strategy to have whatever migrants we have to do what we can to curtail the amount should be in Berbice and Demerara, not in Essequibo. But even that, I think, eludes the government.
Well, Mr. Norton, there are two fundamental things that I have come to recognize regarding this controversy at least 40 years ago. And that is this. The school system in Venezuela teaches that the territory of Essequibo is Venezuela's. The exercise books carry a map on the face with the addendum of the Essequibo portion of the Guyana map. And so this thing is in the school, in the home, in the streets. We have not been doing that
In recent times.
within recent times. The second point to note is that I do not know if they still have the policy, but except you be the only male child in a Venezuelan family, you had to serve in the military. Those two bits of information together, against the backdrop of the rising rate of migrant Venezuelan citizens into Guyana, the fact that the focus is on Essequibo, the fact that in Region 1, their population now outnumbers the Guyanese population of Region 1, what are the possible threats that Guyana faces?
Guyana, like I said, has to have a clear policy. Now, I think the government is hoping to use Venezuelan migrants to give them ID card and vote. That is their sole interest. I don't think they are paying attention to the threats to our sovereignty and territorial integrity. The fact that the police stupidly can put in Spanish on our vehicles, policia, is an indication of one, incompetence, and two, bare stupidity. I don't know of any country in the world where the government puts on the vehicle the language for others to understand. And then let's assume that that's a possibility. One of our ardent supporters that has helped us to keep our
Economy up?
our territorial integrity intact is Brazil.
Yeah.
And so let's assume, stretching it long, that you wanted to help foreigners, then your first choice should have been Portuguese. So it defies logic. It is the normal
Like so
nonsense.
many other things.
It is the normal nonsensical thing. But I do believe that you have to have a strategy to limit the amount of Venezuelans that will come. You have to have a strategy and an ability to identify those who are agents and get them out of here. Because Venezuela isn't stupid. Venezuela is not the Ali government. They will put in those teams agents.
As they have done.
Well-trained military people. And we seem to be just accepting Venezuelans regardless. So you need one to identify the possible, and expel them from Guyana. You need a mechanism to verify who are the genuine migrants and who aren't. And even amidst the migrants, there should be constant information in Spanish. If you want us to talk Spanish, there should be constant information telling them that you are in Guyana's land.
As a refugee.
As a migrant, refugee, call it what. But we seem to be doing nothing except here and again you find birth certificate for some of them so that they can vote. And here is where I have the problem. The government seems to have placed internal politics above
Sovereignty.
And that is where I think the problem is in our foreign policy. And the government needs to appoint a proper foreign minister. You cannot have a lame duck foreign minister. You need a foreign minister that, one, understands the issues. Two, have diplomatic skills to negotiate. Three, have a historical it sounds brutal, but it is true. Nothing I've heard from the present foreign minister suggests to me that he can even be in the ministry as a minister in the ministry under a proper minister. And so I think we are making a mess of it. But like I said at the inception, we have to give them the information. We have to tell them to do the education. We have to do everything to make them do it right. Because in the final analysis, we have to protect our territorial integrity. That, however, doesn't mean we forget that Irfan Ali regime ill-treats us. It doesn't mean that we are not going to pay attention to what they're doing to the Public Accounts Committee. We will address the political issues in Guyana, while at the same time being united against the Venezuelans. That is what I think is the approach.
I have another question for you, Mr. Norton, on this controversy and the threats to Guyana. Since the advent of the influx of migrant Venezuelans into Guyana on our border frontiers, there have been allegations being made. For example, in Kaikan, where there's a small unit of policemen and a small unit of soldiers, Guyana Defense Force soldiers, we have been getting reports about Venezuelan women who are illegally in Guyana. That is to say, they have not been admitted through the immigration procedures, actually sleep in the army barracks, sleep in the police housing facilities with these soldiers and police ranks. If you go to Port Kaitumo, you will know that there's a massive prostitution ring in Port Kaitumo, mostly involving Venezuelan nationals, women. And patrons of that prostitution ring are largely policemen as well. There seemed to me to be a tremendous risk factor, a factor that says there can be infiltration of a certain type. And not only infiltration, but disablement of a possible immediate reaction to something negative. Comment on that for us, please.
Again, it comes back to the government not doing any education. One would have thought first and foremost, there will be a continuous education program for the police, public servants, the Guyana Defense Force. Why? Because they need to know more than anybody else. We've seen all kind of war pictures, cowboy pictures, where the enemy sending women, they're having a nice time and they attack at that time. Unless you can improve the consciousness of them so they understand the importance, they understand that there is a possibility that it can be a structured approach to disabling and disarming you. Now, that responsibility lies with the government. Of course, I agree that individuals need to be responsible. But if a government doesn't educate you on the critical issues, then could you expect those persons to out of the blues just emerge? Some of those soldiers will be in their 20s.
Yeah.
You know what that meant?
Officers will be in the 20s.
And 30s.
Especially.
You know what that meant? It meant that they were never exposed to education in the Guyana-Venezuela territorial controversy, because the last structured programs were in the 70s and 80s. And so the government is failing our people. And that will be my comment on it. You cannot tell me that a military that is controlled by directives can get their own way on an issue like this if it is in fact happening. It is the responsibility of the government. But if you got a police commissioner, if you got a police commissioner like you have, what leadership could he give to forces? In fact, I don't even know if he's au fait with the Guyana-Venezuela territorial controversy and to what level. So this thing needs to be dealt with from the leadership right down to the bottom. You are not going to wish away the Guyana-Venezuela territorial controversy. And I've seen people who should know the situation talking about border dispute, when the Geneva Agreement is very, very clear
That there's no dispute.
and there's no dispute that it was settled by the arbitral award of 1899. Venezuela makes a claim, and Guyana said, look, bring your facts. Let us deal with it. We tried various options. We finally decided it will go to the ICJ. Venezuela objected, saying that the ICJ had no jurisdiction. They ruled that they have jurisdiction. Now the ball is in the ICJ court. What should we be doing as a government? As a government, were I in the PPP's place, the first thing I will do is to continue to keep the focus on the ICJ process. Educate our people. I would have begun to plan, because I believe they will rule in our favor. But when they finish ruling in our favor, it doesn't follow that the story is over. You might have the law behind you.
Well, Venezuela set the stage to reject that.
But we are not setting the stage to counter that. And there is where I think, again, the government is lapsing. But if you remember, Jack, they was seeking the easy way out by giving them some passage.
Right.
You would understand that these people are focused on accumulation of wealth.
And by any means
And
necessary.
by any means necessary, and not on the territorial integrity of Guyana. So that's where the dilemma is.
On this program, I have raised the issue of the absence of ambassadors in the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela and the Federative Republic of Brazil. The controversy with Venezuela over Essequibo has sparked up again, and it usually does that when a political leader in Venezuela is in trouble, facing defeat at the polls, facing rejection of the people and so on. There's some saber rattling. Recently, the government of Guyana named an ambassador designate. Now, we know that an ambassador appointed by the People's Progressive Party is generally a faithful, loyal servant of the People's Progressive Party. In this case, the ambassador designate is a sitting member of the Central Executive Committee of the People's National Congress.
He's not on the CC.
He has resigned.
Yeah. He resigned a while back.
Okay, so I beg your pardon, but is a former member of the People's National Congress, served as a minister of government in the early days, and a senior member of the government later on as CEO of the GWI and so on. This is a person who possesses tremendous knowledge and insight into this territorial controversy. He has not presented letters of credence yet to Venezuela, but what are your thoughts on the appointment, the designation?
Were Guyana a normal place with a normal, proper government, I would have had no problems with the appointment. I think Richard speaks fluent Spanish.
He does.
Which is an advantage. I think he has international experience. I think he served in Guyana and he knows the issues. So I have no problem with his technical competence. What I have problem with is whether it is loyalty to Guyana or some form of political opportunism. This is a man who the PPP was criticizing. They
Threatened to jail.
threatened to jail, they criticized him for GWI, and they were saying all kinds of things about him. I'm aware of some information which I wouldn't provide now. But the PPP, again, is allowing the internal politics to determine some of the things externally. I think this is an attempt to show that Burnham's son-in-law left you and he gone. The careful student of politics wouldn't be surprised because it's not the first time. I believe that you're in a situation where there's the typical wayward schoolboy who he own the ball, the bat, and the stumps. You get out, you pick it up, everything, and you're gone. You find the next group to play with. When you get out again, you don't find the next group. Now, I believe that our diplomats should be people who are committed. Now, when you see that kind of vacillation, it worries me. Mind you, I have no doubt his professional competence. What I doubt is the sincerity and to what extent Guyana's interests will transcend personal interests. The appointment to me seems to be political and personal. But of course, every person is entitled to make the decision. Now, and I can tell you from experience, this wouldn't worry me because when I had differences with Hoyt, the PPP made offers. I rejected them. As late as 2020, when I wasn't placed in parliament, a good friend of mine in the PPP called me to see how much money they would put in our account. And I said to him then, look, my difference with the PPP is their approach and philosophy. It's a racist party, and money is not the critical issue here. So I am not surprised. The PPP believes in bribery. The PPP believes in using opportunism to achieve their objective. And from the time I know the PPP, they have always spent their time. I can talk a story that I never spoke before. We in Parliament years ago, Robert Corbyn was leader. And the PPP was sending information to me. I still have them in email, purporting to be information about Robert Corbyn's involvement in illegalities. And I kept those emails. I never one day published it or anything because I knew at the time what they were doing was finding ways and means of dividing the party and to put chink in their armor. Until today, the PPP continues to seek to do the same thing. So I understand the PPP. And that is why in dealing with the PPP, I am always knowledgeable of the fact that they will spend any money to achieve any outcome that they want. I wish Van West Charles the best. I hope that he serves Guyana and not the People's Progressive Party. And I hope that he shows a consistency of commitment, in this case to Guyana.
This issue is bigger than a political party. It's bigger than a government. And I'm happy to hear you express the sentiments that you have regarding representation of Guyana at the diplomatic level in the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela. I hope that the little issue you just mentioned about the PPP's attempts now to divide the party falls upon the listening ear of those who are targets and beneficiaries of that scheme within the party. And that better sense prevails as we move forward. We have just about 15 minutes remaining, Mr. Norton. I want to come home to what's affecting Guyanese people here now. Inflation is not being talked about at all by this government. But I've had two guests on this program who peg food inflation, the food sector inflation, at an unimaginable figure, double-digit figures. There is a package of 5 billion Guyana dollars sitting there in a budgetary allocation to bring relief, cost of living relief to Guyana. Today is the first day of the 10th month of 2023, and not a cent of that money has gone the way of the citizens who need it, who are hard-pressed, who are suffering daily to put food on the table. But we know that in the month of December, somebody is going to stand up and say, here's a 5% increase or whatever it is, retroactive. In the meantime, the teachers are fighting for a livable wage. The nurses are migrating because of the absence of a livable wage. The policemen are seeking inducements on the roadway as an alternative to a livable wage. What do you have to say to the people of Guyana regarding the rising cost of living? And what do you have to say to the government of Guyana about what they need to do immediately to resolve this issue in the favor of the large majority of Guyana's population?
You have to understand the mindset of the government. The government believes in domination and control. If the government brings a living wage and people are doing well on their wages and salary, then a handout for political purpose wouldn't be useful. So the government deliberately keeps people in poverty. I raised in the last budget that there are no anti-poverty measures. If I have you in a situation where you don't have, and then I come and give you 15,000, I saw a corrupt one, and I say this without fear of successful contradiction, Lorimer, who has been engaged in all kinds of skullduggeries while he played around the APNU.
He played around Guyana Action Party.
Around every party, talking about he get money and he put it into chicken, etc. It doesn't solve the problem of your constant high rise in prices. The government's approach is to keep people at subsistence level. Once you keep them at subsistence level, they are vulnerable. You could come like an angel and now offer a small piece. And you got those who are ill-informed run around and say, we're making money on this government. When in fact, when they give you 50,000 or 100,000, they're stealing billions. Them and a little group going with billions. I will ask our economic group to do an analysis of how much of the 800 billion budget goes to the actual people and how much goes to this elite.
Often I could tell you the infrastructure budget is 50% of the national budget.
Correct. But I'm saying more than that, there are other areas of corruption. And so the aim is not to bring people out of poverty. Now, what the government needs to be doing is one, paying living wages. You have the resources to do it. The government needs to be putting in place social programs that will impact people directly and help them out of poverty. We said, for instance, if you do a survey, get what is the living wages, the government can afford to pay a minimum livable income so that people are not in poverty in the way they are at present. They can pay teachers more. They can pay police more. They can pay soldiers more. Let me show you another thing that the government does, which is wicked, but looks good to the eye. They always talk about a bonus. Now, when I give you a bonus, a month's salary, that is one-off. When we were in government, we gave salary increases, retroactive. What that meant, your salary went up and you will now get a new salary. When you get a bonus, it is one-off. You don't get a new salary. You continue with the old salary. What that means is that your pension would be less in terms of your work, among other things.
Your disposable income and
everything. So the government has a scheme for domination and control. And then they use their propaganda machine to say things like, oh, they take away the bonus. We didn't take away a bonus. We gave to workers a better deal in which they earned more and they had a better opportunity to prepare in terms of their pension. But this government is a government that believes in propaganda. Look at Barajak doing his stupidity talking about the AP and UFC did not add generating power since we were in government. We improved Essequibo. We had power to Berbice.
And we fixed Bartica.
Fixed Bartica. Kokwani for the first time was getting 24/7.
Mabaruma.
Look, GWI, under the same Richard Van West Charles, who they crucified, brought water to 24/7
That's it.
and better quality.
And 49 new wells in the interior.
Correct. And this Joe Cabarra Jackdale, who believes in his propaganda machinery, will go out there to say, you have this problem today because the APNU didn't add capacity. I mean, the man is such a pathological liar. He cannot help himself. I think he genuinely believes this stupidness. But all Guyanese will know that under the APNU AFC, water was doing better, electricity was doing better. So while he has a wide major and can fool himself and lie, the average Guyanese know the truth. And that is why they will be in problems when the election comes, because they believe everybody could be bought. And I do not believe that Guyanese believe that. Guyanese struggle sensibly. They will accommodate you, play stupid with you, but they can do the right thing at the right time.
Mr. Norton, before we come to wrap up time, on a lighter note, the Caribbean Premier League cricket tournament just ended in a result that is pleasing to all Guyanese. The fact that it was played at home, the fact that the Guyana franchise finally get to keep the trophy at home, how does that make you feel about sport, the sport of cricket, the tournament itself, and how do you see that inspiring youngsters, particularly the emerging cricket powerhouse of the Berbice Cricket Board, led by...
Cricket is a complicated thing in Guyana, but let's deal with the general. Every Guyanese should be happy that we would have won. Not every Guyanese would be happy that clearly the government politicizes it. I believe we should leave cricket as a non-partisan activity, which Guyanese could rally to. CLR James, in his book Beyond the Boundary, give you a clear indication of the importance of cricket to not only the Guyanese, but to the West Indian psyche. West Indians are depressed when the West Indians are losing. Guyanese, we went right to the tape many times and we lost. But sometimes we exaggerate. Yes, it was our first CPL win. But when this tournament first started under the disgraced, I don't remember his name now.
Alan Stanford.
Guyana won it. And so it is not new. But there was a drought for many years, and we're glad there's now some water there. But like I said, cricket should be left, sport generally, should be left as a unifying force for our people. It should never, ever be made. Look, people in the cricket board and around complained that all the tickets were purchased and given to people who they want to give it to ensure that they manufacture the crowd that they wanted. That obviously isn't good for cricket. But cricket as an entity, one of the things I could promise you is we will depoliticize sport. Sport needs to be given resources. There's need for a plan for sport. If you're doing well in franchise cricket, you could bring people from all around and it helps your franchise. But we also have to look at Guyana's cricket, meaning a proper system to bring our children through so that Guyana is a powerhouse, even without franchise. And so those are the kind of things I would look at. It boggles my mind that the people who swim the most and have this ability are indigenous people. But for some reason, we never consider putting an Olympic-sized pool in an indigenous community. Linden, Kamaka produce good swimmers. We never consider an Olympic-sized pool in Linden. We have to take a different approach to sport. We have to see where the talents are, put the resources in it, and treat it as a non-partisan event that can bring glory to us and help us to unite even amidst our political division.
I want to use this opportunity to echo your sentiments and to offer words of congratulations to the Guyana Amazon Warriors cricket team. And I want to single out Mr. Hilbert Foster of the Berbice Cricket Board, who has been doing a fantastic job nurturing our nation's cricketing talent. If you look at the Berbice cricket team, you will find that the Berbice cricket team can hold its own against any national team from the West Indies territories. So Hilbert, thank you very much for what you're doing, and may you be given the strength to continue to do the work that you're doing.
We also need people emulating him.
Oh, yes.
Because in some areas, they can't cricket down the wrong road.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. I wish that there can be more like him. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us today on Nation Watch. October 1st, 2023. The countdown is on to regional and general elections, as much as the countdown is on to Christmas 2023. My guest today, Mr. Aubrey Norton, leader of the People's National Congress Reform and leader of the parliamentary opposition. I'd like to thank you very much for taking the time off to join us and to speak with the nation on the issues of current political situations. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
Viewers, thank you very much for joining us from wherever you're joining us. Until we meet again, God bless.
As Guyana sits on the economic and political crossroads, we speak to the nation's opinion leaders and decision makers to get their views on the challenges the country faces and the path it must take to achieve national development. Welcome to Nation Watch. Now here is your host Mervyn Williams, former member of the Guyana Parliament